Bernie Sanders is the most popular politician in America, and the reason why he's the most popular politician in America is because he's one of the only politicians actually fighting for single-payer healthcare, for tuition-free public colleges and universities, raising the minimum wage. He's consistently on the right side of the issues that the American people care about. But nonetheless, even though he is doing things that will benefit our lives, it seems as though the corporate media and political establishment are on a bash Bernie spree as of late. And it makes no sense to me, but that's the way it's been for a number of reasons. I mean, for one, there is the attempt to pin blame on him for the Virginia shooting, and also when it comes to elections, they're saying basically that he's getting in the way of Democrats' need to win or desire to win, and the New York Times decided to chime in. So in an article titled "Democrats in Split Screen, the base wants it all, the party wants to win." That's debatable. Well, they first discuss the obvious split within the Democratic Party, saying the growing tension between the party's ascendant militant wing and Democrats competing in conservative-leaning terrain was on vivid split-screen display over the weekend. In Chicago, Senator Bernie Sanders led a revival-style meeting of his progressive devotees, while in Atlanta, Democrats made a final push to seize a traditionally Republican congressional district. It may be essential for Democrats to reconcile the party's two clashing impulses if they are to retake the House of Representatives in 2018. In a promising political environment, a drawn-out struggle over Democratic strategy and ideology could spill into primary elections and disrupt the party's path to a majority. Oh, and best believe it will. If the Democratic Party establishment doesn't acquiesce behind progressives, there will be no unity, and they will lose yet again. But I want to mention a word here. I want to talk about a word more specifically that they brought up. They brought up the word militant. So they're trying to frame Bernie Sanders supporters as not just aggressive, but literally overtly violent. I mean, if you look up the definition of militant, violence comes up. But they're also creating this narrative that the Democratic Party, they're being pragmatic. They just want to win. But the Democratic Party's base, I mean, the progressive militant wing, for example, they just want certain policy concessions when that conflicts with the Democratic Party's need to win. Except that's bullshit. They've been centrist, and what has that gotten them again? Oh, that's right, completely wiped out at all levels of government. They control nothing. And you're telling us that they know what it takes to win? No, you haven't reached out to the base. You aren't giving the base anything, and you expect us to rest assured that the Democratic Party knows what it takes to win? They don't know what it takes to win. But what they do in this article to prove their point is they use Jon Ossoff as an example, who, as you all know, he's running for Congress in the 6th District of Georgia. And they continue. Outside Atlanta on Friday, Jon Ossoff offered a decidedly un-Sanders-like vision of the future in Georgia's 6th Congressional District, a conservative-leaning patchwork of office plazas and upscale malls where voters attended his campaign events wearing golf shirts and designer eyewear. That's a weird thing to say. In a special election that has become the most expensive House race in history, Mr. Ossoff, a 30-year-old former congressional aide, presented himself as essentially anti-ideological, greeting suburban parents near a playground and giving a pep talk to volunteers. He stressed broadly popular policies like fighting air and water pollution and preserving insurance coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. Bucking the left, Mr. Ossoff said in an interview that he would not support raising income taxes for even the wealthy and opposed any move toward a single-payer healthcare system. Attacked by Republicans for his ties to national liberals, Mr. Ossoff said he had not yet given an ounce of thought to whether he would vote for Nancy Pelosi, the House Democratic leader, in a future ballot for Speaker. The tension between Mr. Ossoff's message and the appetites of the national Democratic base has not appeared to hinder his bid for Congress. He has raised more than $23 million, an astonishing sum largely in small online donations from Democrats seeking to put a dent in the Democrats' House majority. Several polls over the last weeks showed Mr. Ossoff leading his Republican opponent, Karen Handel, though both parties agree that the race remains a toss-up. winning over Republican voters remains a critical task. Though he started his campaign pledging to make Trump furious, Mr. Ossoff did not bring up the president in his campaign events, and he has called talk of impeachment premature. In Mr. Ossoff's district, there was little evidence that voters yearned for a harder-edged liberal message. At an early vote rally on Friday, Paul Flexner, an educator and Democratic activist in Dunwoody, said Mr. Ossoff had been wise to avoid Sanders-style politics. Ann Easterly, a consultant who attended an Ossoff event in Well-Tended Park, said she hoped Democrats would take a lesson from Georgia about how to channel partisan energy into difficult races. It's our hope to find moderates who can appeal to moderates and Republicans who are not Trumpians, just because of the way the districts are drawn now, she said. So, make no mistake about it, they're advocating for the Democratic Party to double down on a losing strategy. Because what did Hillary Clinton do? She ignored progressives, and she instead was so confident she thought that she had progressive votes on lock that she then decided to court Republicans. And what happened? How did that turn out for her? She lost to a historically disliked buffoon. So they're advocating that Democrats do the same thing again, even though it's a demonstrably terrible strategy. And furthermore, they literally state here, quote, winning over Republicans remains a critical task. I would beg to differ, considering the number one priority is winning over your own fucking base. I mean, why do I even have to come out and say this? If you don't have your base, you cannot win. You don't shun your base, and if you can't even win over your own goddamn base, how do you expect to win over Republicans? This is one of the dumbest articles I think I have ever read, because it's just completely tone deaf. It's completely tone deaf. How can you purport that running centrist moderate candidates and trying to court over Republicans is what they need to do when they've been doing that and they've failed? They've been wiped out across the country at all levels of government, and you're telling them to do the same exact thing that facilitated these losses? I mean, are we living in the Twilight Zone? What is wrong with you people? And how many Republicans try to win over Democrats? This is only something that the left is talking about, but Republicans have moved so far to the right that Democrats have also moved to the right to try to compete with them. But you're ignoring the fact that the progressive platform is a populist platform. It's majoritarian, and it's supported by a majority of the country. But they want to make sure that history repeats itself. So they want the Democratic Party to run more Republican-like candidates, which will ensure that they will lose. So let's take, if you want to, use John Ossoff as an example, that's fine, but I have some examples for you as well. So there was someone named Allison Lundergren Grimes who was challenging Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. She was basically a Republican. She was a Democrat in name only, and she ran one of the most conservative campaigns a Democrat ran in a while. Guess what happened? She was wiped out. She was so afraid to admit that she was liberal that she wouldn't even admit to the obvious fact that she voted for Obama.
And Mitch, that's not how you hold a gun.
And Mitch, that's not how you hold a gun.
I mean, come on. And then you also have Mark Pryor from Arkansas, who literally ran as a Democratic theocrat, who says that God guides his decisions. Guess what happened to Mark Pryor? He lost.
This is my compass, my North Star. It gives me comfort and guidance to do what's best for Arkansas. I'm Mark Pryor, and I approve this message because this is who I am and what I believe.
Ha! Gay!
So if you continue to give your base just a marginally better option than the Republican Party, why would they come out to vote for a Republican-led candidate when voting is already a chore? I mean, you have to stand in line for hours. In many cases, you have to take time off of work. You have to register to vote. It's a hassle. So if you are going to actually give voters something to vote for, I think they're willing to put in the time to vote. But if you're presenting them with this illusion of choice where the only option you're providing them is someone who's marginally less shitty than the Republican, they're not going to come out to vote. They're not going to think, ooh, I better get out and support that person who's going to screw me over a little bit less than the Republican Party. That's not what happened. That's not what they do. You have to give them a real alternative. I mean, the UK election just happened. If you give voters an alternative that will galvanize the base, it will galvanize young people to come out and vote. But they can't get that through their heads, and it's blowing my mind right now. I don't get it. Millennials now match baby boomers and make up the largest generation in the country, but yet they refuse to tap into this political base and embrace the message of the candidate that won overwhelmingly among millennials. Populism galvanizes millennials. They'll come out and vote everywhere if you give them a progressive populist choice. But the New York Times, with this article, they're trying to justify the Democratic Party's decision to run to the right to the point where modern day Democrats don't even look like Democrats anymore. They look like Reagan Republicans, and the Republican Party, they just moved so far to the right that they're now bordering on proto-fascism. So here's what the New York Times needs to understand. You cannot win without progressives, and you won't win without millennials, and by you reinforcing all of the Democratic Party's bad decisions, you are ensuring that a right-wing extremist party will remain in power. So if you truly care about the Democratic Party, then you should encourage them to move to the left and become more populist, because that's what's working. I mean, think about some of these electoral victories that progressives have had across the country where they're winning in overwhelmingly Trumpian districts. If you are liberal and give them a real alternative, guess what? They're going to vote for you, but I mean, they just want the Democratic Party to continue losing, and rest assured, they're going to continue losing if they continue to run to the right. And reading this article is just mind-boggling to me because it's just so stupid. They refuse to learn the lesson that they should have learned just now.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.